Hi, this is Mark Rabin. Welcome to Lean Blog Audio. Today I'm reading a post that was published on August 12th, 2024. It's titled, The 5 Most Controversial Ideas in the Mistakes That Make Us. If you'd like to read the blog post, find links and share it with others, look for a link in the show notes or go to leanblog.org/audio 392. In writing my book, The Mistakes That Make Us, Cultivating a Culture of Learning and Innovation, I wanted to challenge the way that we think about mistakes, leadership, and organizational culture. Throughout my career, I've seen firsthand how the traditional responses to mistakes, meaning punishment, fear, and blame, can stifle growth and innovation. The ideas I present in the book are meant to provoke thought and, in some cases, stir debate. Here in this post, I'd like to share and dig into what might be 5 of the most controversial quotes and concepts from the book, talking about why these ideas are important and how they can transform the way we lead and the way we work. So first, punishment should be the exception, not the norm. This quote might raise some eyebrows, especially in organizations where punishment is seen as the go-to response to mistakes. I get it. Punishment seems like a straightforward way to enforce rules and maintain discipline. But what I've seen over and over again is that when punishment is the norm, it creates a culture of fear. People then become more focused on avoiding punishment than learning or improving. They hide their mistakes, and when mistakes are hidden, they can't be addressed or corrected or prevented in the future. I believe punishment should be reserved for truly exceptional cases, those involving willful misconduct or repeated negligence, for example. In most situations, it's far more effective to address the root causes of mistakes, which are often systemic rather than personal. By making punishment the exception rather than the rule, we create a culture where people feel safe to admit mistakes, discuss them openly, and learn from them. This shift is crucial for fostering continuous improvement and innovation. You can read more from a CEO who agrees that a problem-solving culture is better than a finger-pointing culture. I've linked to a different blog post within this post. This is about GE Aerospace CEO Larry Culp and some things that he said in Bloomberg Businessweek. Okay, the second point. A culture of fear and punishment drives mistakes underground. So again, continuing on this theme of fear and punishment, I've seen that when these are the driving forces in an organization, mistakes don't disappear, they just go underground. This idea might be controversial because it suggests that many organizations, especially those that pride themselves on things like discipline and accountability, might actually be doing more harm than good by fostering a fear-based culture. When employees fear punishment, again, they're less likely to report mistakes or speak up about problems. This lack of transparency can allow small issues to fester and grow into much larger problems. Instead of driving mistakes underground, we need to bring them into the light where they can be addressed and learned from. The goal should be creating an environment where people feel safe to speak up, knowing that their honesty will lead to positive outcomes, not retribution. This idea of feeling safe to speak up is really the core of psychological safety. And I've linked to another blog post about shifting away from punishment. That blog post is titled From Punishment to Improvement, Transforming Workplace Culture. Okay, point 3. The real failure isn't making mistakes, it's failing to learn from them. This quote is one of my favorites. Sorry to pat myself on the back, but I think it reframes how we think about failure. In many organizations, mistakes are something to be seen as to be avoided at all costs. There's an underlying belief that perfection is the goal, and any deviation from that goal is a failure. But the truth is, mistakes are inevitable, especially in environments where we're trying to do things that are innovative. That requires that we encourage a little bit of risk-taking. The real failure, in my view, is not the mistake itself, but the failure to learn from it. If we can shift our focus from avoiding mistakes to understanding and learning from them, especially when, again, we're trying to do things that are new and innovative, we can create a culture that's more resilient and adaptive. This idea might be controversial because it suggests that leaders should not only accept mistakes, but embrace them as necessary components of growth. And that doesn't mean, look, that every misassembled part or every medication error is something to celebrate. We need to try to prevent process errors, but when we're trying to be innovative, We should shift from seeing mistakes as purely negative to recognizing them as opportunities for learning and improvement. I've shared a blog post, interesting story I heard last year. That post is titled, "Story When Firing an Employee Doesn't Prevent the Repeat of the Mistake." Okay, point 4. Leaders must create conditions where people feel safe to admit mistakes. Telling them to be brave isn't enough. I often hear leaders tell their teams to be brave and to speak up about mistakes or issues. While the intention is good, I believe this expectation is misguided. Simply telling people to be brave doesn't address the real barriers that prevent them from speaking up, namely the fear of negative consequences. This idea might be controversial because it shifts the responsibility from individual employees to the leadership and the broader organizational culture. If employees don't feel safe admitting mistakes, it's not because they lack courage. It's because the environment isn't conducive to that openness. Leaders have to actively work to create a culture of psychological safety where admitting mistakes is not only accepted but encouraged. This requires more than just words. It requires consistent actions that demonstrate a commitment to learning and improvement over punishment and blame. There's another blog post I've linked to titled, "Instead of urging your employees to be brave, help them feel safe speaking up." And then number 5, blame the process, not the people. This concept challenges one of the most deeply ingrained practices in many organizations, holding individuals quote-unquote accountable for mistakes through blame. Traditional approaches often focus on identifying who is responsible for an error and ensuring that they are held accountable, sometimes or usually through disciplinary action. However, I think this approach is misguided. Most mistakes are not the result of individual incompetence or negligence. They're the result of flawed processes. When we focus on blaming people, we miss the opportunity to address the underlying issues that caused the mistake in the first place. By blaming the process instead, we can focus on improving the system, which in turn reduces the likelihood of the same mistake happening again. Now, this idea can be controversial because it requires a fundamental shift in how we think about accountability. It's not about letting people off the hook or excusing poor performance. It's about recognizing that most errors are systemic and that real improvement comes from fixing those systems, not from blaming individuals. There's another post that I've linked to here about the need to shift beyond blame in healthcare, and that post is titled, "Beyond Blame, How Punishing Healthcare Workers Fails to Prevent Medication Errors." So in conclusion, the ideas I've shared in the book, The Mistakes That Make Us, are meant to challenge the status quo. I know they might be controversial in some circles, maybe not to listeners of this podcast and readers of my blog, but I believe these ideas are necessary for creating a culture of learning, innovation, and continuous improvement. By rethinking how we approach mistakes, whether it's reducing our reliance on punishment, fostering psychological safety, or focusing on processes rather than people, we can build stronger, more resilient organizations. I hope these ideas spark conversation and reflection. After all, it's through challenging our assumptions and exploring new perspectives that we can truly grow and improve. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. I'd love to hear what you think. If you want to leave a comment on this blog post, you can find it with a link in the show notes, or again, by going to leanblog.org/audio392. Thanks.